short conversation or interaction with a physically normal stranger left you wondering if you just talked to something non-human or supernatural, like an Angel de Mongo Stalion time traveler, etc. Story 1. One evening in winter, I didn't leave work till almost 7 p.m., so I was walking home and thought it'll cut through the park to get home quicker, even though it's really poorly lit. A couple of minutes into the park I could hear a group of people behind me and in front of me and was thinking I'm going to be jumped. Up ahead there was a lamppost with a CCTV camera on it, so I thought I'll stop there and at least I'll get jumped on camera. As I stood beneath this light, this really tall woman jogged over and stopped next to me. I'm 6 feet tall and she was way taller than me. She asked me, "Is it okay if I walk with you?" And I was like, "Sure, okay, I guess." She walked with me to the edge of the park, talking about how dodgy the park was at night. As soon as we got to the edge of the park, she told me to have a good night, then jogged back into the park. It was a really weird experience. I felt certain I would have been mugged or something if she wasn't there. I walked through that park every day for about a year and never saw her again. Story 2. I swear 2 girls working at my local Starbucks are Nordic blondes, insanely tall, blank stare, both speak to each other without actually speaking. If you make small talk, they have to think for an awkward amount of time to form the most perfect response in a monotone voice. They are insanely tall, their skin is almost the color white, and their eyes are like ice. I told me wife about them, and if she had seen them, and she hadn't, a few weeks later she comes in saying she talked to the strangest girl working at Starbucks, almost like she wasn't human. I described one of the girls and my wife's face went straight to shock validation. There is something off about those two, but in a very non-threatening way. Also, they work alone together, just the two of them, at the only Starbucks for miles, not a thing out of place. Edit, because this seems to be becoming a minor misconception. They are not twins and I never said they were. If you implied that, it was merely implication. They're not related at all and have names like but not actually Brittany or Anne. I've never seen them speak to each other, but they will strangely speak to customers. Edit 2, because people got their finger on the trigger today. Nordic blondes is like saying greys when you're speaking of the paranormalities. The whole purpose of the OP, saying their skin is white, isn't saying they are white humans. It's white like the color. For you Christians out there, they look angelic, too perfect. I'm not doxing them. Good luck finding them with Starbucks in every town in the state. Story 3. Back in 1997, I was aged 8. I shared a room with my younger brother who was 4 at the time. We used to have our grandparents over for dinner most nights, and it wasn't uncommon for them to stay long after we had gone to bed. They would come and kiss us goodbye in bed when they were going to leave. This one summer's day, I woke up during the night and saw my granddad. It wasn't unusual, like I said, "Hi Granddad, are you leaving now?" He came and sat on my bed and said, "Yes, I'm saying goodbye for now." He kissed me and then went and sat on my brother's bed and said kissed him as well, then he left. My childhood intuition picked up that he was a bit sad. Next morning, I went into the kitchen to find my mum crying. She told me that my granddad died last night of a sudden heart attack. I said, "How can that be? I saw him last night." He came and said good night to me. My mum said that my grandparents left shortly after I went to bed last night. I also remembered that my grandpa said goodbye and not good night. It was quite a shock, but at the same time a little comforting too. I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but this is a memory that I won't forget. Edit. Thank you everyone for the likes, awards and comments. Very much appreciated. Story 4. There was this kid I used to hang out with when I was around 8 years old, and it still obsesses me. He wasn't from my school, and neither was he in the only other school in town. One day he just showed up at the end of school day and played with my friends and I. Just like kids do, he was really nice, polite, clean, but he just seemed to have no family. He would never talk about his parents and avoided conversations about family. There was some sort of orphanage nearby, but friends who lived there said that he didn't live with them. He was weird, but in a weird way he was nice and fun, yet really mature for a 8-year-old kid. He had this emotional intelligence, he understood people, talked very well about the other's feelings but barely showed his. He had this strange aura. He would start really deep conversations that were oddly deep for kids our age. He also had a smooth voice, at an age when most of the kids have a voice that tempt adults to make him mute. One day one of my friends lost his grandma and he found oddly accurate words to reassure him. That scene is still in my head to this day. On the other hand, he knew no cultural stuff. Every film, cartoons, comics, TV shows, he wouldn't know. We showed him stuff like WWE, Dragon Ball and other manga anime and he became really fan. The only times he would act childish was when we wanted to know more about his life. He would answer funny and barely comprehensive things like some kids do. Today I'm 100% sure he did that on purpose. I really looked up to him although he was no leader or whatever. He was weird in a cool way, or cool in a weird way. At an age when a weird kid is just a weird kid no one wants to FW, he felt out of this world to me. My mother had a strange feeling about him, and years later I asked her about him and she told me that she couldn't do anything because he was so nice and polite. But to her he wasn't a child and seemed really weird. He just hung out with my friends and I for about a year. I have great memories with him and I feel like he taught us much. One day he just stopped coming to play in our neighborhood and no one saw him again. I have more anecdotes about him, and as time passes more things feel wrong, weird to me. I have a deep feeling that I met someone too special or whatever. I'm not that much into supernatural stuff, yet I could start believing in a lot of things just because of this kid. Edit. To try to answer some of your theories. He's a grown man, that's disturbing, but would make sense considering his maturity and freedom. It feels weird to imagine remembering some of the times we hung out with him, Nonetheless, I can't figure in what distress one can have to live like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if you happen to do crazy stuff when you do. I wouldn't totally blame him for that. Him being in a cult or something that fits him being so secret and not talking about his life, but it really doesn't fit his freedom. It seemed like he could be there whenever he wanted. He had no problem mixing with others. I am an atheist, but most of our friends were Muslims or Catholics, and I remember he was really open-minded. Tell me if I'm wrong, but that wouldn't match, does it? He was homeschooled if he was a child, yeah, most likely, but I can't help imagining something related to the latter point with that. Life can be complicated, and maybe there were many parameters, crazy parents, some ideology behind that. Just him being homeschooled wouldn't explain everything. Reincarnation stuff, I actually love that. Tell me more if you would. And I wanted to add that he didn't seem to be abused, homeless, malnourished. He looked healthy, happy, although his maturity would somehow show, and you sometimes could tell he wasn't normal, and many adults, my parents and my friends, spent much time with him, and no one saw something weird besides him. Abuses aren't always seeable, so I know it doesn't invalidate, but still. Story 5. I live in a small town with very few black people around Central Europe. I was pretty down because of a girl, and went for kebab. While I was standing in a queue for kebab in the pub right next to it, there was a woman that caught my attention, because of two things. Initially because of her race, that's just uncommon to see there. Another, the fact that I for sure never seen her before, despite living in this small town my entire life and going around this pub every day. Another thing I noticed was that she didn't order anything. She just sat there by the table alone. Then I ordered my food, and while waiting for it, the woman leaned over the fence that separates kebab place from the pub, looked directly at me and offered me an ice cream. I accepted the offer, and immediately after that she looked me in the eyes, smiled a bit and clearly, calmly said, "I love you." Then as I received my kebab, I turned around where she was, and she was gone, vanished as quickly as she appeared. I inspected the ice cream, and it seemed okay and package was intact. It was delicious. TLDR, unknown, but very kind stranger gave me ice cream, said I love you when I needed it, and then vanished. Story 6. I've posted this before on a strangest things you've ever seen thread, but I'm kind of hoping someone else has had a similar experience. I was a sophomore in college. I walked into my math class like any other day and sat in my usual spot, about 4 seats in on the 3rd row. Even though we didn't have assigned seats, there was always a girl sitting 2 seats to the left of me, empty seat between us, and her male friend to her left. They seemed to just be good friends, always laughing, never any reason to give me concern. This day in particular, I sat down, got my spiral and pencil out, and just quietly sat there looking forward and thinking about what I was going to do after class. Suddenly, I got this eerie feeling. I looked up to my left, and my heart practically stopped. The girl was staring straight at me, blank face, and her eyes were shining like a bright, piercing electric blue, shining like lasers. Nothing at all natural. I can't explain accurately. I was basically paralyzed and couldn't move or say anything. I eventually blinked and looked forward, then looked back, and the girl's head was turned back to her friend as he was talking again. About 2 years later, I was with friends and we were driving to a restaurant. Traffic was building up since it was rush hour and we were stopped in the right lane. I'm in the back seat and I happened to look up, diagonally to the left, and through the windshield, I look into the car sitting in the lane next to us. Its back bumper is parallel to our front bumper, so I can see the driver easily. He's turned almost completely around and looking back at me, staring intensely. Even from that distance, I could see his eyes were that piercing, bright, laser-like blue, and I froze again. Just like the last incident, I was eventually able to blink, look away, and then immediately look back. The man was turned forward, the light turned green, and we all started moving forward. It's been about 15 years and I haven't experienced anything like that again, but it with my mind for a while. Story 7. I was working in Florida as a manager in a large chain of automotive dealers. I was on the service side and dealt with the customers who had the most difficult issues or were upset. One day an older man came in and I went for a quick test drive to assess his concerns with the vehicle. He was calm and polite, a very easygoing person. After speaking for a few minutes, he asked me if I liked magic. He then proceeded to start talking about where I was from. He didn't ask a single question, he just began to talk. He narrowed down the area until he was within a 20-minute drive from a hospital I was born in. That hospital is an 18-hour drive from where that dealership was. After a few minutes he said, "But you didn't live there very long, moved south to the city of," right? He was absolutely spot on. Then he started rubbing his eyes and kinda humming. He asked me how long I had lived in Norway, then narrowed it down to the city I lived in for 8 years. At this point I'm thinking he's some kind of weirdo who has done a background check on me. But how would he know where I had lived while overseas? He said, "Do you believe in magic now?" On the return drive to the dealership, I was running every possible scenario through my head. Did a friend set me up? How did he know the name of the city in Norway? When we arrived he leaned over and said, "I'm just having some fun with you. I was in the CIA for years as a linguist. Now that I'm retired I just use it as a party trick." He had me so confused. He honestly could have said he was some kind of psychic and I wouldn't have been able to argue. Story 8. This story is hard to explain, but I still get shivers when I think of it. He was a customer I was helping out. Honestly, there was nothing that really stood out with him. He was handsome, but in a normal way. He dressed normal, talked normal, was blandly friendly, as you are with strangers, just a normal upper-middle-class type guy. The only thing that really stood out was his blue eyes. Not in a goofy supernatural type way, he just had very, very blue eyes, but for some reason he made every hair on my neck stand on end. Alarm bells were going off in my head like crazy. All I wanted to do was hide. I have never felt this way before or since. Even when I was followed home by someone, I have never felt such gut deep you are in danger as I did with this guy. After ringing him through, he reached out to shake my hand. This is not common at all here, but out of politeness I took it and shook, and I instantly got so nauseous I almost gagged. The moment I got nauseous he just held my hand and smiled, and something in that smile made me absolutely sure he knew what I was feeling and he enjoyed it. I'm not religious in any way, but I remember thinking in that moment, oh, is this the devil? After he left I was still so sick feeling I had to go to the back and sit down. I'm not sure if he was a serial killer or what, but to this day I have never experienced something even close to that encounter. I absolutely felt bone-deep certainty that I was in some sort of danger. I felt every bit the prey. It's a hard story to explain, because it's all based on feelings, so I haven't told that many people about it. But to this day, it is absolutely one of the scariest and weirdest things I have experienced. Story 9. My girlfriend had broken up with me. I was walking home crying out if nowhere. A younger-looking girl, maybe 3 or 4 years younger-looking than me, comes out of nowhere and says, "Hi, it's dark and I'm alone. I see that we're going in the same direction and you've been crying. Should we make company?" I said sure. I asked what her name was. She just replied with a name. Maybe later. Let's get to know each other first. Let's just talk. We had the most wonderful conversation. She was super insightful, had an answer to my every question and a comment to my every word. To this day it has been my favorite conversation ever. We walked for blocks and blocks. As soon as I said hey thanks I was super sad, but I'm not anymore. I felt super lonely and I don't anymore. This talk has been incredible. She said, "Okay, this is my house." I asked for her name. She said no, it's not necessary to know that. Thanks for keeping me safe. She kissed me on the cheek and entered the house. I had lived there for 5 years and lived there for an extra 5 years after that. Had to walk very often by that house. Never again I saw that girl. I'm pretty sure she was an angel of some sort. Story 10. Nomi, friend of mine, was really sick with the flu, could barely stand. He sat down outside the pharmacy while they were getting him meds ready. The girl with bright blue hair sat down across from him and said, "You aren't looking too good." They had a weird conversation and he finally asked, "Are you a hallucination?" To which she replied, "Yes, but not one of yours," and walked away. To this day he is not sure if she was real or not. Story 11. A little over 20 years ago my friends and I went to a 4th of July party at the house of a guy they went to high school with. It started out pretty chill, but as the night went on it ended up being the kind of party I didn't think actually existed outside of an 80s teen movie. Huge house in a rich neighborhood. No regard for property damage. Picture the party at the end of Weird Science, but subtract the mutant bikers and add a couple hundred kids in their teens and early 20s, half of whom were on LSD, and many of whom showed up with literal carloads of fireworks. At some point these two guys showed up. Nobody knew who they were. They spoke to no one, not even each other. They didn't eat anything, they didn't drink anything, they didn't try to interact with anyone at all that I saw. What they did do was freak everyone straight the out. Visually they were exactly average. Average height, average looks, average build, ambiguous age, ambiguous ethnicity, 100 forgettable, except they absolutely radiated darkness and hostility. They would just stand on opposite sides of a room and glare angrily at each other for a while, then walk into a different room to glare angrily at each other again. They seemed to communicate with each other like that, creepy as. It was like there was some kind of evil force inside of them that was barely contained by their skin. If they walked into a room where you were, it felt like the air itself suddenly became oppressive. At some point my friends and I dipped out to go check out another party up in the mountains, and a couple of people we knew took off to a different party in a town in the opposite direction of where we were going, and about 30 miles away from the original party. About halfway to our destination we stopped at a gas station to get smokes and drinks. When we walked out those guys were there. They were standing outside of their car, perfectly still, just staring holes through us. I don't know if I've ever felt that creeped out. We all piled into our car in record time and peeled out of the parking lot. Thankfully it didn't look like they tried to follow us, and we never saw them again. A few hours later we went back to the first party to find a girl we knew sitting on the floor holding a baseball bat, jumpy as, ready to swing at anything that looked threatening. Apparently those guys got way creepier after we left. Nobody would go into any detail though, so I never found out exactly what happened, but everyone who had stayed at the first party looked thoroughly shook. The next day I ran into one of the people that took off to the other party, and right about the same time we had our gas station encounter with the spooky twins. They had the exact same encounter with the same guys at a gas station probably 50 miles away from where we were. Meanwhile the people who stayed at the first party swear those guys didn't leave the party until hours after we saw them at the gas station. It was all intensely freaky. I don't know who those guys were, or what they wanted, but I have genuine doubts as to whether they were really human. Story 12. I've been waiting for this question for a while. One of the times I was homeless, think this might have been 2015, it had been about 8 months and I had gotten into the swing of being homeless. Like, I had a routine of what I would do and whatever. One day I'm sitting beside this construction yard waiting for the dealer to come by, and this random dude comes out of nowhere. He starts talking crazy talk like immediately I realize there's something wrong this guy mentally. Just his actions and the way he would move his head and the way he spoke sort of like a deaf person, told me something was wrong with him. But we spoke for a while and he started getting into the story about aliens and UFOs, And that's my kinda, so I'm like nice, and he sees I get visibly more excited about talking to him and he starts drawing on the sand on the floor. I used to play a lot of Kerbal Space Program, and I know a bit about the stars, and I realize this dude is 100 correct in all the things he's saying. He drew Pleiades, then drew Earth and explained how one can go from here to there, using correct terminology and everything apoapsis, periapsis, gravity turn etc. But then he points to a spot in the middle between Earth and Pleiades and says, but this is where they will stop you if you try to go now. I'm super interested, and I'm like, who? IRC. He says they're people with metal wings, who travel without a spaceship, and when they down to Earth they fly and land like birds, and then their wings turn to bone and flesh and they become arms, and if they stay too long their bones inside their arms become rock, and then they can't fly anymore, so they choose to do evil things to draw attention until they come get fetched by the others. He starts drawing weird symbols and shapes and things on the sand, and he starts getting like Fruit Loopy and starts kinda grabbing me and shouting and getting weird with me, so I get defensive. He jumps up and says, do you want to see what they did to me? He jumps up, turns around, pulls his pants down, and his hole from like upper thigh to lower back is all just one big open wound. It's literally just meat and blood, and I'm like, dude, you have to get to a hospital, but he says no, they won't be able to help him, and now I'm like, freaking out a little because this is clearly someone with serious issues who is hurt or been hurt or something, and I need to do something or get away or something. My dealer finally arrived just at the right time. I say goodbye and take off, and I'm like, WTF am I supposed to do? My dealer and I both know all the faces from around this area, and we both don't know this guy. Anyway, I come back around this area a couple minutes later and he's gone. I end up spending the night inside a big concrete pipe in the construction yard about 100 m away from where this all took place. It's like 2 a.m. I'm sitting there smoking meth in the dark when I hear the most intense blood-curdling scream you've ever heard, and shouting no 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 please. I could recognize his voice. I come crawling out of the pipe. There's another homeless dude who I know also comes crawling out of the dark just outside the construction yard. We both recognize each other, and I'm like, dude, what the should we do? He immediately turns away and says we should leave. All the while this guy is still screaming just up the road. My buddy takes off into the darkness and I stand there for a few seconds and I see two human-sized things. Literally looked like people with wings taking off into the sky and vanishing almost instantly. The screaming stops. I'm trying to figure out if my eyes are playing tricks on me, if it's 'cause I'm hallucinating because of the meth, I don't know. I decide to go check on him and there's literally just a pile of his clothes and his shoes where he was sitting, same place as earlier. Never heard from or saw him again, neither did my other homeless buddy. Nothing. I think about that dude quite a bit. Story 13. There was a young woman, about my age at that time, early 20s, sitting alone at a nearly empty coffee shop. She seemed like she was trying not to cry, so I went over and asked if I could sit with her. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing at the same time. She didn't go into detail about what was going on with her, but she felt like there was no hope. I did my best to encourage her, told her not to give up, tried to give her reasons to hold on, thought of ideas that might give her a spark of hope. The coffee shop was closing. I wrote my phone number down and told her that I would love to hang out with her again, and she could call me any time. She looked at me and told me that everything I said to her wasn't for her to hear, it was for me. I hadn't told her that I was in fact suicidal. I had originally gone to the coffee shop to think about how to best kill myself. While talking to her, I figured if I could maybe help someone else not feel the way I do, I wouldn't kill myself, at least not yet. She not only saved my life that day, but gave my whole life a new purpose filled with hope. I'm a therapist now. I help people all day. She hugged me then walked out the door. I ran after her because she forgot the napkin with my number on it. I was no more than 2 seconds behind her. I got outside and there was no one there. Story 14 happened just under a decade ago. Was walking home at night. There was seemingly no one else around until I passed by a church and saw a black guy standing outside, apparently just hanging out. This was in Bismarck, North Dakota, where there are very few black people. He said hello and I nodded and waved. As I continued on my way, I heard him say, "You're gonna have a bad day tomorrow." The next day, my basement apartment was flooded with literal from a backed-up sewer line. Story 15. I was going through a really hard time at the time, and I was walking back home after getting something to eat alone at a local food court. I was standing at the traffic lights and I saw this guy kind of off to my right and got a weird feeling, like he had an aura or something, a totally normal-looking man, by the way. Anyway, a few minutes later he comes up to me as I'm walking and says, "You have one of the most kind energies I've been able to see," and I'm like, oh god, is he trying to pick me up? WTF, please leave me alone. But then he continues and accurately, like insanely accurately, tells me what's been going on in my life, as in he knows that XYZ thing is happening, but in a broad sense. Like, I think recently you probably lost a family member close to you that you love, you had a falling out, but you need this to push forward, etc. When I clearly looked freaked out, he just smiled and said, "Yeah, I have a gift. People don't believe me, but it's a thing," and just wandered off. To this day I'm like, did I meet an actual psychic or a stalker? Story 16. I went to a meditation retreat where we would spend most of the day sitting and meditating. It was a big room like a sports hall, and everyone had designed seats with about 1 square meter of area for themselves. The rows were aligned and everyone was in line. There were about 200 people in this hall. You would hear the instructions and then close your eyes, and you were not supposed to make any noise and keep your eyes closed until they told you to open. Like about an hour at a time. Of course, being my first time I could never be still and meditate for that long, so I would open my eyes and look around and watch people. Sometimes there would be others also looking around too. On the third day there I noticed this woman 2 rows ahead and 1 to the right. She was moving very weirdly. She would have jolts of arm movements. She would shake uncontrollably. I just sat there and watched, a bit shocked and a bit confused. It got progressive worse as the days went on and it was freaking me out. On the 6th day I am sitting there trying to meditate and open my eyes to see her shaking and moving one arm above her head like one of those blow-up things we see at gas stations, up and down like if a gust of wind lifted it and then it fell. While at the same time shaking her torso and head, I am watching it gobsmacked. Then she suddenly stops abruptly. Her head falls forward so her chin is touching her chest and she starts twisting her head to the left all the way until she locks eyes with me. Oh man, my heart never beat so fast. It was like a horror movie. Her face turned towards me in that weird position. Her hair covering most of her face and through it I could see her eyes watching me. She did that for about 10 minutes and the sound for us to stop started. It would be a sort of song to raise you back into consciousness. She turned forward, sat straight and got up and went ahead with a day as cheery as can be. That cut me off from meditating altogether. I am still scared of her and had nightmares about her coming into my dorm room the rest of my stay at the retreat. Story 17. This kinda deviates from the question, but I do think it's relevant. As a kid my grandmother lived in a different country. She was super affectionate, but due to a severe back problem she couldn't give many hugs, so the most physical touch we had was holding hands. She always had the most tender and warm hands, even on the coldest days or when the AC was on. We used to sit and talk for hours well into teens. When I was 21, she suddenly passed away from a stroke. My last words to her before I saw her last were I love you very very much, and that really comforted me at the time. In accordance with Jewish culture we bury our dead, and since I am one of the only males in the family I bore the brunt of digging most of the grave. I was exhausted and sad from the whole day that I didn't get to express my emotions until the evening when I got home. I rushed to my room and let my emotions out, cold and drained from working so hard and especially being outside during winter. As I lay on my bed, my entire body cold, suddenly a weird feeling of warmth felt one of my hands. My hand became searing hot, almost like I had a fever, and I felt so eerily calm and placid. I knew she was there that night holding my hand and saying goodbye. I haven't felt sad since, because I got to say my final goodbye. Story 18. As a child, I used to play outdoors with my childhood best friend Kyle. We would either knock on each other's doors and ask and come out to play, or we would hear each other in our respective front yards and come outside. One day when I was about 10, I walked outside into my driveway because I thought I heard Kyle outside. I called out to him and a little girl about my age came from around the back of the house instead. I learned her name was Amaya. She told me she was going to be there all day because she's waiting for her mom to pick her up. I asked her if Kyle was coming but she said no. Kyle didn't technically live next door, his grandmother did, so it's not uncommon for him to not be on the block for days because he's at home. So, we spent the whole day playing. I can't remember the exact time, but I know it was from the hottest point in the day to when the sun almost began to set. It was the peak of summer, so that meant we were outside for hours. We spent the first half of our day inside of my garage playing because it was cool, and as outside began to get cooler we moved our shenanigans out into my driveway. After a couple of hours she said that she had to go because her mom was coming soon. I hugged her, really sad that my new cool friend was leaving, but I figured she must be related to my neighbors in some way, so I'd be seeing her again. The next day, Kyle's mom dropped him off at his grandma's, so I came outside to play. I asked him when Amaya was coming back. Kyle said, "Who is Amaya?" I thought he was just being annoying, but by us going back and forth I realized he really didn't know who Amaya was. I told him she had on a blue top and blue khakis yesterday, and her hair was in 3 large twists with pink bow boss. Kyle insisted he didn't know who I was talking about. I asked his brother who was 5 years his senior. He didn't know who I was referring to either, a little creeped out. I asked my parents wasn't I playing with a girl yesterday. My mom and dad had no idea what girl I was talking to. They thought I was outside in the garage playing by myself. As a last resort, I asked Kyle's grandma. She told me there was no little girl there yesterday. She was home with her husband and she doesn't know a little girl by that name. To this day, Kyle swears he doesn't know who I'm talking about. I don't know what to make of the situation. I know I played outside with that girl. We jumped rope, we blew bubbles, we played hand numbers. No one knows a little girl named Amaya, but I spent the day with her. Story 19. Not exactly a stranger but an older man in my hometown. He was the cleaner for the local bank, one of the few black men in town. Sat next to him in a cafe. He was the most intelligent and interesting person I ever met, like NASA intelligent, medical research level. I talked to him several times over about 5 years and came away feeling like he was another life form. He also happened to be nice and funny. I never parted without learning something fantastic. Story 20. Was coming back on the plane from a very important job interview and I thought I blew it. I was spacing out during the entire flight, and when the plane landed and I finally got up to grab my bags, an older woman 3 aisles down from me looked straight at me and said, "Don't worry. I'll be okay, you'll get it." I reflexively thanked her and ignored what she said, but a few hours later I got a call that I got the job. Only then did I remember what she said. I still don't know why she said that and how she knew what my problem was. Story 21. Not that exciting, but I was walking in woods by the sea in southern England and I came across a rock formation that had a sign, the wishing seat. It was rather like a giant throne, although obviously natural, not man-made. I sat on it, and entirely frivolously made a wish. As I was sitting on it, a young family passed along the path in front of me, a man, woman, boy, and girl, all very ordinary in dress and appearance but strikingly beautiful, so the following year I was walking along the path again, but in a different month and at a different time of day. I came across the wishing seat again and sat on it, and the same family passed by again. The world is full of coincidences, some significant, and some not, but this seemed rather a long coincidence.